Welcome to the Be Amazing podcast. On this show, we'll give you the fuel you need through motivational pep talks, the fitness tips to be your healthiest self, fortitude to push through the hardships, and focus you need to build the skills needed for the next level, no matter what that looks like to you. I'm your host, Seal Smart. I'm a wife, a mom, community leader, and fitness professional of over 18 years. I'm here to be your biggest cheerleader, advocate, and connector. Let's be amazing together. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Be Amazing podcast. I am so excited about this episode. I have been looking forward to talking with Leslie Mathis, and she is here today. Leslie, welcome to the show.
Celia, thank you so much for having me. It's so exciting to be here, and I just love your podcast. And exciting fact, this is the first time I've ever been a guest on a podcast, so I'm always in the other seat, so this should be a lot of fun. But I am Leslie Mathis. I am the owner of Streamline Multifamily Group, and then I also run asset management for Woodfield Development. A lot of people know me that way, but I am a apartment enthusiast. I love the apartment industry. It has served me so well over the years. I fell into the industry 22 years ago, and I had no idea what this ride was going to look like, but it is amazing, and I can't imagine doing anything else. We're a family of apartment people. My husband builds apartments, and our joke kind of is I lease them, and our kids have grown up around it, all three of them. My oldest definitely probably knows more about the apartment industry. She was 6 weeks old, and I was touring apartments with her just to keep her out of daycare. So she's been around it always. My son has no interest in it. And then my youngest is the one that most everybody knows. She's 11 and wants to be an interior designer, and she was at Empower, and she goes on a lot of property visits with me. So that's been really fun. But we're just a family of apartment people.
I love that. And this is really like how I even met you, was because I had heard your podcast, which I didn't even know that you were like, this is the first time I'm going to guest. So I feel honored that you jumped on mine. But I had heard you talk to Lisa Taylor and her girls, and you had this whole conversation. And I just was like, oh, I really want to talk to you, because not only are we in the same industry, but like you share the same passion for empowering women and empowering women in the multifamily industry, which I know we're going to talk like a little bit more about later on. But I'm just so excited to have this conversation and to really understand, how did you like get into multifamily? I know you said you kind of fell into it, but what was it that got you in and then kept you in it?
Yeah, I am like most people. I fell into it. I had no idea even what it was. And my dad and I had visited Charlotte 22 years ago, or almost 20, I guess it's almost 23 years ago. Anyways, we visited Charlotte, and at first I grew up on a lake. And so when I got to Charlotte and we got to Lake Norman, I was like, wow, this is beautiful. This is where I want to live. And I'm sure my dad just thought I was, another wild, crazy dream. I'm an only child. I've always been a dreamer. But a few months later, I went to my dad and I said, hey, listen, I think I'm going to move to Charlotte. And he was like, well, okay, whatever. I was in my early 20s and out of college and just kind of lost and didn't know what I wanted to do. And some other things transpired that I just left Panama City and I drove to Atlanta and to meet a friend. And before they got to town, I left Atlanta and said, hey, I'm just going to Charlotte. And I had taken a few things with me to either work in an office or wait tables or bartend, because I knew I had those skills. And then I was just going to figure out Charlotte or Lake Norman area. And I got there and I called my parents to let them know where I was at. And they were like, what in the world? Like, you need to come home. Like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. Just like, I'm going to live here. And so I went looking for a place to live the next day. And as I toured a property, it was the only property on the water at the time. And so anyways, I was like, this is where I want to live. And the leasing consultant said to me, well, I need a proof of income. And I'm like, what do you mean proof of income? It was the only apartment or the first one I had ever tried to lease on my own. She goes, you need a job. And I'm like, well, I don't have one. I need a job and a place to live. And she was like, no, but you need to have a co-signer. And I called my dad from a payphone. This only will make sense to people who live in Charlotte. One, a payphone, right? And then
Right.
two, I was on exit 33. It was the lake exit at the time. And I called my dad. He said, well, I can co-sign for you, but I didn't want him to. So I went to one more place. They had offered me a job, a weekly apartment in Mooresville. And I had actually went to that one before I called my dad. So I'm messing up the story. But anyways, I told my dad about that. And he was like, listen, that sounds like a good deal, but I really think you should come home. And that job was a housekeeping position. So I called that manager back after I told my dad I was not moving back home or coming back home. So I called her and I said, hey, I'm going to go ahead and take that housekeeping position and I need an apartment. And she said, well, I'll just leave the key in the lockbox for you and we can settle up the next day and just come to work at 9 or 10 o'clock the next morning. And kind of the rest of this history. So I started as a housekeeper. I moved into that apartment community. It was short-term living, like leasing weekly, monthly, or 3-month leases. And it was brand new on exit 36 in Mooresville. Like within the first couple of days, I was in the office because I'm a terrible cleaner. And then I worked my way up from there. The funny part of that is it for local Charlotte people, you might remember, but it was David Dry Company. And I never filled out an application. I never took a drug test. I worked for him for 8 years and I worked my way up from, probably the most entry-level position to RPM. And then after Eddie sold half the portfolio, I went to work for Drucker and Falk before moving to Raleigh. And so, but I don't know, I've never looked back. Like it was such a good fit for me. Like, I don't know if it was because at any moment, like if you're bored during the day or you don't like what you're working on at that moment, like you can do something else. So on that little deal, like because it was short-term leasing before that was even popular, like you were constantly in this lease up mode. And I didn't have the best manager. She was never there. So I just kind of figured it out. Like I had no training. Like people would like just probably fall out of their chair if they knew some of the things that we did. Like we didn't even screen people. Like they filled out their application and I would look at it and I'd be like, oh, this looks good. So approved. And that was probably a very dangerous place to be. I had a credit card machine. And so I would take people's credit card payment over the phone to get them locked in. I did most of my leasing over the phone because probably I was lazy. I didn't want to walk to the 3rd floor. It gets hot in Mooresville. I didn't like going out in the rain, but I just loved the people part. And then I learned how to clean pools and plant flowers. And, I have a crazy paint touch-up story where I used the wrong paint because I didn't know what I was doing. And then I got the opportunity to learn when you put semi-gloss paint over flat paint, it's a lot of work to fix. You got to sand it, kilt it, and repaint it. But I learned all of that stuff kind of like trial and error. And then I also had a really great boss who our property was under the hotel division of David Dry. So those operations work very differently, but because it's based on nightly revenue. So like if you're missing your goal in the hotel industry, you just have to sell more room nights and you have more opportunity to do that. Like you can get creative quickly, but with that, like on expenses, they're very per unit type expenses. So he taught me probably how to be a great operator and really dig into the financials. And even back then, I was held accountable to things below NOI because the owners are still responsible for interest payments and things like that. So I think that's where my operation skill set comes from, is working under a hotel operator early on in my career. But I just have always loved it. I love the marketing. I love the branding. I love the people. There's just nothing that I don't like. That I think that's just what kept me in it. And then like it's all the people that we get to work with, like to start in Charlotte where there's just so many great connections and people, and like a lot of my friends are still there. I can't imagine doing anything different.
Thank you so much to Novice Studios for sponsoring the Be Amazing podcast. You might have noticed Be Amazing has a new look, new titles, and a YouTube channel. Kristen Stegall and her team helped me put a new look and strategy in place to take Be Amazing to the next level. If you want to launch a podcast, revamp your existing podcast, or hand off your production to an experienced team, schedule a call with Kristen at novicestudiosclt.com or head to the link in our show notes. I love this so much because just hearing how you start, because I didn't know any of that. Like, I didn't have any idea like where you started. And I knew that where you are now with Woodfield Development, you're the director of asset management. And part of my question, and you kind of really have answered a lot of it already, but like, was how did you get to that position? And it sounds like a lot of what you did early on prepped you for where you are right now.
Yeah, for sure. I would say that, along the way, I never said no. I was always asked to do things. So even back, going to work for a small family-owned company opened a lot of doors for me as well. If I would have started my career at a large management company, I wouldn't have been able to write a policy and procedure manual. When David Dry Company rebranded and they went back and wrote like their mission statement and their core values, I got to do that. I got to be part of that team. And I really think that really was just one of the building blocks that led to where I am today. But then in that whole process too, I would get phone calls. Can you do this? Can you do that? And I would always say yes. I never said no. One year they gave me a Golden Plunger Award because every terrible, awful project, like I would get, and then I would have to figure it out. And so I think that also led to my operations skill set and just really becoming an operator and learning to be strategic and then going to work for a third party company like that also led to it. But when I decided to go out on my own, and I think people should know this, and this is why I'm transparent about it, is I wasn't thriving in my position when I started my company. I'd always had this entrepreneurial spirit. And I remember going to my dad. Again, I'm an only child, so my dad's probably my best friend. But I went to my dad probably pretty early in my career and said, hey, listen, I want to move home. I want to start a marketing company. I want to live in this condo on the bay. And my dad was like, go back to Mooresville and go back to your paying job. Like, what are you thinking? And I was like, but I can do marketing and moving gifts and all these things for apartment communities. I can do it here. And he said, no, go home, go to your job. Like, what is wrong with you? And then pretty early in my marriage too, third party was never a good fit for me. And I'm always vocal about it. And I wasn't thriving in that situation either in my first third party. And I went to my husband and I said, hey, I can bake cupcakes, sell them to apartment communities. Because again, those are all the people I know. And they can have them for refreshments, moving gifts. And he was like, Leslie, what are you thinking? Like, have you ever baked a cupcake? And I'm like, no, but how hard could it be? And he was like, just go back to work and find another job. So I went back to work. And so I kept looking for another job. But that's how I ended up in Raleigh with Mid-America. But fast forward a little bit more, again, like I feel like that owning my own company never left me, but I wasn't thriving. I was barely surviving. And my husband came to me 8 years ago and he said, why don't you do this on your own? And at the time, Bunny Blake with McDowell Properties had taught me how to do renovations several years before that. And I just was really good at it. I didn't love it, but I was good at it. And he said, why don't you do that for other people? Like minimize the pain, save them money, like run their renovations and just get it going. And then you can do what you want, because I really wanted to work on the development side. I was like, who is this guy? Like my husband is saying like, leave your job and go start your own business. But as soon as he gave me the green light, like I was in. So that's really how I started Streamline. But it was because I was failing and I had to find something else to do. Or, I mean, I probably would have I don't know, I might have got fired or something. Like, again, I just was not thriving. And I didn't know what Streamline would look like. I knew that today it would look very different than it did 8 years ago, but I knew I could figure it out. Like, again, those were all my skill sets. If I would have went to open a coffee shop, I probably would have totally messed that up. But anything with apartments, like, I knew I could figure out. And it definitely looks different today, but Woodfield Development was always a company I wanted to work with. I just started like sending them notes, like, can I work with you? But what I really wanted to happen is, like I said, my husband builds apartments and his like specialty is plan reviews. So I had this bright idea in the early stages of Streamline that I would hustle these architectural plan reviews and my husband would do the work and I would keep the money. And so it's
That
never
sounds like a great plan.
yeah, in 8 years, it's never panned out. Never. But I still have this kind of dream about it. I hope like one day it comes to fruition. But that's how I started like trying to get in with Woodfield, and they never responded on that side. And I was doing work with a couple clients, and I would do anything. Like, people would call me and say, hey, can you go shop a property? And I'd say yes, because I was almost like this starving artist, but it just happened to be a starving apartment girl. And a friend of mine had said, hey, Woodfield Development is looking for an asset manager. I was like, oh, I'm their girl. So, but then there were times still passed, like we didn't connect. And I just got really lucky that I reached out to Greg Bonifield, and he happened to be with my friend at NMHC, and I had name dropped her and he responded. And so I sent him my resume and we agreed to talk like when he got done with speed dating at NMHC. But then time still passed. Like, so if you are chasing a dream, like, don't give up because people ignore you or tell you no. Like, be persistent because it pays off. And then, but time had passed again. And then I happened to be with this same friend, and Greg Bonifield came, and I was in Charlotte chasing after some business, trying to build Streamline. And he landed in Charlotte, called my friends to see if they could have lunch, and we happened to be together. So as soon as she dropped me off at the hotel, I emailed him and said, hey, a little birdie said you were in town. I'm in town. Can we meet? And the only time he had available was the next morning at like 8 o'clock in the morning. And it was honestly all I had. So I don't think that's a coincidence. We met, and it just was such a good fit, or we thought it was. He gave me kind of a test assignment, and I went to Maryland for him 2 weeks later to see what I could do about turning a property around. And I've been with Woodfield since then, like almost 8 years later. So, but I do think that if I wouldn't have experienced challenges along the way, or if I would have said no to opportunities, I probably wouldn't have the skill set that I have today. And also, I think persistence paid off. Like, I don't know that I was told no, I just didn't get a response. So I think it taught me too, and I teach my teams this, that no doesn't mean no, it just means not right now. And so if there's a client you want to work with, or a property you want to be on, or a position you want, like, keep going after it, because the timing might not be right in the moment, but if it's something that you think is a good fit, don't accept that as your answer, because you could really miss out on something pretty amazing.
I love all of this. Like, this helps me so much, just hearing you talk about your path, and like just the hustle that you had early on, and the willingness and showing up. It is all about just keep showing up. And I know for me, being on the vendor side, it's the same. My hustle is the same. I always have to keep showing up regardless. Like, I know how many emails I send out, how many drop-offs I've been, like how many times I've been to events and meeting people, and they don't ever tell you no. But 2 years later, you might hear from them because you never gave up on just like that little touch or that little reach out or whatever. But I just think that there's so much strength comes from facing those challenges and not getting the yes right away. and using the no and building on that and becoming a very persistent individual. I can't even, like, this blows me away. This whole podcast episode, like, I'm like, didn't know any of this. And I can't even tell you, I knew like that I knew that I would like get a lot from the conversation and hearing what you say. But like, to me, this is women in business. This is women that want careers. This is women that want more. My whole theme for the next year is I want to be around women that are ambitious and want more. They're not settling because it's just okay, or I can, this is enough. Like, no, when you feel like you're made for more and you want to do more and you want to be around people that lift you up that way, like that's you. I resonate with you so much in the things that you're saying. And like, I knew that this conversation was going to be like super powerful. Now we've talked about Streamline and your business. And I know that you have like your team is mostly women, correct?
My team is all women.
Okay. Because this is what's going to launch us into your Empower Her, which I think is just amazing. And I really want to have some time for that.
When I started Streamline, I didn't know what it would look like. But I don't think I like ever said, oh, Streamline is just going to be a female company. And I don't know that that's the goal today, but it just is how it's turned out. And I'm thankful for that. Like when a year ago, the last 14 months has really been about growth for me. And I decided like, I'm going to grow my team. But that was the only way to grow Streamline was to add team members, because I'm only one girl and I can only do so much. And being scared to hire somebody and make their payroll and, like be responsible for the roof over their head just felt like this overwhelming pressure to me that I didn't think I could handle. And so it was kind of my own way. And that's really why Streamline stayed the way that it was. It was just me. And I started working with a life coach 14 months ago. And I'm obviously super vocal about that. I wish it was just the thing I would have done 10 years ago, not 14 months ago. And gosh, I mean, what if I would have done it 14 years ago? But I started adding team members. And I think in our industry too, it's easier on the operation side. It is female dominated, but it wasn't until I flipped over to the ownership side that it's not female dominated. It's very male dominated. And that's when I came so passionate about growing women in our industry. And I think, I'm sure it didn't hurt anything that we were really struggling to hire and recruit people on the operations side. And so I think we're missing this boat on like showing people what a great career this is. And maybe just the women's side of it was just easier because that's my network. And then I feel kind of lonely on the ownership side because that part is really male dominated. So how do we grow and empower women on that side of it? And then it just becomes kind of like this whole thing. And maybe men are maybe they're too scared to come work at Streamline because like sometimes I'm worried. I'm like, do people think I'm a man eater? Like, that's not the thing. Like, I love our industry so much. I really just want to grow people and fill holes in our industry and, make a difference. Like to me, it's not about money. I don't have this crazy dream to be a millionaire and fly around in a jet or like, it's probably like such a wild shot anyways, but it's not that. Like, it's always about like, how do we make this better? Like, how do we make a change? But I've been so fortunate as I decided to grow my team that like these women have kind of rallied behind me and wanted to join my team. And everybody's been placed in a way through a connection, mostly from another female. And it's really become this very humbling experience that I just want to continue and share with other people and help other people along the way. And I think like you said it too about leveling up and doing more and being around women. Like to me, that is so empowering to be around women that want some of the same things. And what I've learned this year, like I've had to level up and change some of the rooms that I'm in so that I can also level up. And being around women that have like interests and like goals. Some of them are even outside of our industry, but they're just these like powerful women running after some big, crazy dreams. And man, that is motivating to me. And so to tie that together too, like to be on my team, you've got to want that too. Like you've got to want to be part of the story, because this isn't going to be easy. And, even at Streamline, like we've seen that this year, like we've kind of sometimes flown by the seat of our pants and we've had to figure things out. But when you want to be in it and you support the people with you and you have some of the same passions and like-mindedness, like I feel like you can be unstoppable.
I love this so much. Just the fact of you talking about the whole leveling up and getting yourself into new rooms. Same thing. You can be in the same room and feel like you might feel stagnant. So you have to make those shifts and really look for the people that you want to lock arms with, or you want to be next to, or rooms of where people are doing much bigger things. And the fact that you even take that into people that are working on your team, that's what is so powerful, is just that constant push and the constant willingness to change. And that's what the whole empower her thing, I feel like what you're doing is you're actually creating a room for women within this industry. You're giving them an opportunity and a room to step in where they can be empowered and can be lifted up and can be pushed. Give us a little bit more about that room. Who should be in it?
Yeah, it is fantastic and powerful. And I think it's one of those things where, you have these ideas, but you're like, is anybody going to buy in? Like, is this right? Like, because this is a wing and a prayer. It's a leap of faith. Like, I am not a party planner. I mean, I think you have to be in this industry, and in this industry, you have to be able to host a happy hour and, pull people together, and we can do that quickly. But a conference, like that's not my wheelhouse. Like I've been to 1 million, I've spoken at 500,000. Like, so I knew like I could probably figure it out, but I wanted to build this platform that we go and we do the work. And I think I'd already had it on my heart for some time to build a female network. And Rebecca Rosario and I'd had lunch years ago, right before I started my company, or at the same time. And we said, she's pretty passionate about the same thing. I think our visions took different directions. And I don't know that this is something like, it's so personal that I think partnering with somebody else would not have turned out the same way. But that's where the idea sparked. And I think as women, we do have to spend more time with each other and empower them. But as I flipped over to the ownership side, I started having conversations or has seat at the table with women that were running billions of dollars of real estate. And they earned this position that they had, but they were stepping on other women to get there. Mm-hmm. And they were still stepping on other women. And I was like, this can't happen. Like, this is what we have to fix. So again, like that was still on my heart. I was like, how do we fix it? How do we do this? And, that can be overwhelming. Like, you're just one person. And like, sometimes you have these ideas on repeat in your head and you're like, am I the only one? Like, is this only me? Am I the only one who sees this? Am I crazy? But I knew, and I felt so strongly about it. And when I started working with my life coach 14 months ago, I wrote down my dreams and goals for the next year, 5 years, 10 years, and it was on there. And it was like the top of the list. So it became like this, you've got to do it. But as I started putting in the work, I wanted other women to do it too. Like, I mean, we can all go, there's 1 million conferences you can go to about NOI growth and trends and all the things. I don't know of one where you go and you put in the work about yourself, and that you go and you sit in a room with like-minded women. And I only know women from our industry. I mean, anybody could come to Empower because it's nothing about apartments, but those are the only people I know. So that's my network. So that's why they're in the room, and those are the sponsors I can hit up and, all the things. But to have the conversation to say, there is this voice in your head and it's an imposter syndrome. Like, how do you fix it? What confidence block are you missing? How do you build that back up? How do you balance, all the things in your life? How do you show up better? How do you break this cycle and bring other women along with you? And as I started talking about it, I found more women that were passionate about it, but nobody was really saying it. And so I just knew that's what we needed to do. I probably struggled a little bit. Maybe I didn't get the message out correctly, because 80 or 90 days before the event, there were only 35 women signed up for Empower. And some of those were sponsors. Like, you want to talk about sweating bullets. Like, this is my event, my personal money. Like, reserving hotels and speakers and things are not inexpensive. And I mean, we begged, scraped, and pleaded to get women in that room. But I do believe that they thought it was me speaking, or we were talking about NOI, and people probably felt like I don't need another NOI conference. I don't need again to talk about getting back to the basics. Like, but we got them in the room. We had 126 people. And what we learned was women are craving this connection and this desire to work on themselves and grow and empower each other. Some of them didn't know. I had women at the end of the event come up to me crying and saying, I didn't know I needed to be in this room, but this is exactly where I need it to be. And thank you so much. Like, I never anticipated that, but it was just confirmation that this is what we need. And I'm sure women in general need this, and we need to build stronger sisterhoods and environments and networks where you're safe and you can have the hard conversations. But again, my network is just multifamily. And so that's where we had to start. And we really see this growing and doing so much more, and scholarship funds. And it's never been like my mission to do it to make money. It's, again, to fill a hole and a gap within our industry. But I think it's so much bigger than that. And I'm so thankful that like everybody agreed we needed this. Like, we already have like 30 people signed up for next year, and I don't even have the venue yet. Like, I'm sweating again because like, oh my gosh. But we really hope that we'll sell out this time at 250 women. But just the response that truly like this is needed. And women, like, this was the crazy thing too. Like, every speaker was hand selected, and it was interesting how like everybody resonated differently with each speaker. And just when they were like, oh my gosh, like something fell flat, somebody would come back and be like, oh my gosh, it was amazing. Or and at conferences, people tend to leave early because they're like, I got to travel home. Well, we had people leave early, but they were so upset that they left early because they just didn't realize that the content would be so strong for the whole day. And so they're like, oh my gosh, next year I'm there, I'm staying an extra night. Like, I'm not missing a minute of it. But I think it again goes back to like craving this like need to make a change and empower each other.
Well, you obviously, your heart, it's so evident, like it's seeing it and listening to you talk about it and being so passionate about it. And I definitely think that you are creating that room and that there is a need for it, especially in the multifamily industry. And I look forward to being a part of your event this next year, like being a part of it in some way. Just because like just your energy and the fact that you're just so open and transparent and just what you're doing, like it's just amazing. So I so appreciate you just being so open throughout this whole conversation about your career path, about your heart for the industry, your heart for women, and the fact that you're so excited and ambitious and have dreams, and you have a life coach. Like, there's so much in that, because I feel like that is so inspiring in itself. How can you not want to be around people like that are that hungry for more, that want to do bigger things? So I just like, thank you so much for taking the time to share your heart. I'm just like, this has been a really good conversation. And before I let you go, I do want to ask you, do you have anything on your heart other than everything that we've talked about? Is there anything like that you want to leave the listeners with? Is it a tip on, whether you're trying to build a career path, or is there something else with Empower Her, or is there just something in life right now that's just really on your heart to share?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. There's so much. And I think because I'm winding down from like a year that I knew that was going to be a year of growth, but like head down, working really hard. And I think I'm my body feels like there's 3 weeks left. Like you can do this, you can do anything. And I have started working with a new life coach, but I keep my original life coach on speed dial, and she's actually become a really great friend. But she shared a few weeks ago that Ed Milet speaks often each year about the separation season, and that looks different for everybody, and it can be different timing, but it's about leveling up when some people aren't even showing up. And so I recently did a podcast and a Monday motivational about it, but it kind of like kept stinging me because I felt like I'm in this like survival mode. But I just think people need to hear that things are just a season and people are going to critique what you're doing. Like you might be on site and staying late every night, and there's somebody watching you and they're inspired by you, but there's also somebody watching you and they are critiquing you and giving you a hard time about maybe you had to hire a dog walker or somebody else is giving your baby a bath at night. But it's just a season. So if that's your race, like run it and don't let those people get in. And if you think you're not showing up or you think you're not doing the best that you can, take a minute and be grateful in the moment and take a look at what you're doing and don't beat yourself up. Like it's never too late to make a shift or a change, but know that you're doing the best that you can. And again, it's just a season, and don't let the negativity like hinder you from doing something. There's always going to be a critic.
Absolutely. Appreciate so much this conversation and everything that you've shared today. Where can they connect with you? Where can we find you?
So Streamline Multifamily has a website. So streamlinemultifamily.com. Most everything can be found there. Our podcast is Multifamily Streamlined. It's anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's on every platform. You can follow me at Leslie Mathis, or there's a Streamline, or there's also an Empower. And Empower is Empow with HER. So those are all on Instagram. So lots of platforms. We have a Monday motivational that goes out. We're going to start doing a Thursday morning call in a safe environment where we can brainstorm, encourage other people. Anybody can join it. So kind of be on the lookout for that as well.
Oh, that's awesome. I'll be on the lookout. I'll make sure to drop the links so that they can get to your website, your podcast, and all the things. But
Perfect.
Thank you again so much for being on. This has been amazing.
Yes, Celia, thank you so much for everything you do too. It's exciting to like spend time with somebody who has so many passions that are same as mine. And I really appreciate all you're doing for our industry and showing up in all the ways that you do and making a difference. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. It really means a lot. Thank you so much for listening to the Be Amazing podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please send it to someone who inspires you so they can feel amazing too. If you want to help us reach new listeners, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Don't forget, you can find the video versions of our episodes on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram at the Be Amazing Podcast or DM me at Seal Smart. I'll see you in the next episode.